painted in 1844, the Hammock, Le Rêve, Die Hängematte, marks an important moment in the early career of Gustave Courbet, when the artist was beginning to define himself against the conventions of the French salon. Executed in oil, the canvas depicts a partially nude young woman asleep on a hammock, placed within a shaded woodland glade where a brook meanders nearby. The intimate setting, at once secluded and sensuous, situates the reclining figure within a pastoral idyll that recalls earlier traditions of Arcadian repose, yet with a distinctly modern frankness in its treatment of the female body. The work is not merely an exercise in naturalism, but also a cultural dialogue with contemporary literature. Courbet alludes directly to Victor Hugo's 1829 poem, Sarah la baigneuse, Sarah the Bather, a text that intertwines sensual imagery with romantic reverie. By embedding this literary reference, Courbet situates his painting within a broader romantic discourse that embraced the dreamlike and the erotic as expressions of inner subjectivity. The alternate title of the work, Le Rêve, the Dream, reinforces the notion of an imaginative suspension between reality and fantasy, amplifying the sense that the viewer is witness not simply to a nude, but to a private, poetic vision. Yet Courbet's painting was met with resistance. Submitted to the Salon of 1845 at the Louvre, it was rejected by the authorities, a decision that underscores both the restrictive academic standards of the time and Courbet's growing reputation as an outsider to institutional taste. Unlike mythological or allegorical nudes sanctioned by salon conventions, the hammock dispenses with the protective framework of classical subject matter. Instead, it presents the female body in a modern, natural setting, a gesture that threatened to collapse the boundary between high art and sensual immediacy. The painting's current location in the Reinhardt collection at Am Römerholz, Winterthur, Switzerland, further attests to its contested trajectory. Denied a place in the mid-19th century French art establishment, the work nevertheless found its preservation in a private collection, ensuring its survival as a record of Courbet's youthful boldness. Seen retrospectively, the hammock reveals the seeds of Courbet's later realism. Its unapologetic treatment of the human figure, its defiance of academic propriety, and its grounding in contemporary cultural reference all anticipate the strategies he would employ in the 1850s and 1860s to challenge the hierarchies of subject matter in French painting. If the hammock was too daring for the 1845 Salon, it was precisely this daring its conflation of poetic sensuality with uncompromising naturalism that signaled Courbet's future role as one of the most disruptive and innovative painters of 19th century Europe. Painted between 1844 and 1847, Gustave Courbet's The Bacchante stands among the artist's earliest surviving works, a formative exercise in both technical mastery and mythological reinterpretation. The title directly evokes the Bacchantes of Greco-Roman mythology, the ecstatic female followers of Bacchus as well as the long lineage of Renaissance paintings and sculptures that had celebrated these subjects. By situating his work within this classical framework, Courbet aligned himself with an esteemed pictorial tradition while simultaneously testing the boundaries of his own emerging style. At this stage in his career, Courbet was still deeply influenced by the old masters, The sensuality and composition of the Bacchante recall the work of Correggio, particularly his Venus, Satyr, and Cupid, in which the nude female figure is rendered with both idealized grace and corporeal presence. Courbet's dialogue with these predecessors suggests his conscious effort to situate himself within the Western canon, drawing from established models while experimenting with a more tangible realism. Another painting from the same period, Female Nude Sleeping by a Stream, Detroit Institute of Arts, underscores his fascination with the nude as both an aesthetic and a cultural problem, a subject caught between ideal beauty and naturalistic representation. The provenance of the painting further reflects its complex historical trajectory. Sold in 1914 by the Amsterdam dealers Frederick Muller and C.A., the canvas passed through the Van Nierop collection and later the Lefebvre Gallery in London before being acquired by Dr. Gustave Rau for his Foundation in Cologne. Its 20th century circulation through major European collections highlights its enduring resonance as a work that bridges the gap between Courbet's academic beginnings and his later revolutionary realism. In 2011, the Musée Courbet emphasized the significance of the Bacchante in an exhibition exploring the relationship between Courbet and his contemporary, the sculptor Augusta Clesinger. Clesinger's celebrated Woman Bitten by a Serpent, 1847, was shown alongside Courbet's painting to reveal their shared exploration of sensuality, mythology, and the expressive potential of the female nude. The juxtaposition underscored how both artists, though working in different media, sought to revitalize classical themes with a more palpable immediacy and emotional charge. Viewed in retrospect, the Bacchante is not merely an academic nude, but an early declaration of Courbet's artistic ambitions. While indebted to tradition, it already contains the seeds of his later defiance. His insistence on presenting the human body not as an abstract ideal, but as a living, breathing presence. This synthesis of mythological subject matter with a budding realism foreshadows the painter's eventual break from academic conventions and his pursuit of an art rooted in lived experience. Courbet painted consistently in a realist mode during his time in Paris. For example, he was quick to decline a request to paint angels for a church, remarking, "Show me an angel, and I will paint one." Instead, he painted regular folk in all their glorious ordinariness, and it was not a surprise when, in 1848, Courbet's growing group of influential friends appointed him leader of the realist movement in Paris. The poet Charles Baudelaire and the outspoken anarchist Pierre Proudhon were both part of this group of intellectuals that pushed each other to challenge the norms of the day. Also in 1848, under a newly formed republic, the Paris Salon became jury-free for 1 year. This allowed Courbet's submission of 10 paintings to win automatic acceptance, where they made a great impression and helped the painter win a gold medal the following year. Under Academy rules, the gold medal gave Courbet immunity against future selection committees, a bypass that he enjoyed until 1857, when this rule was changed. Without this protection, burial at Ornans, 1849, amongst other important paintings, probably would have been rejected. This huge confrontational painting was Courbet's most audacious display of rural realism. The grand scale at which he depicted the ordinary people attracted a firestorm of rebuke. with many conservative critics uncomfortable with the picture's implicit support for democratic politics. Painted during the winter of 1848-1849, Gustave Courbet's After Dinner at Ornans, L'après-dîner à Ornans, represents a pivotal moment in the history of 19th century French painting. Executed on a monumental scale, 195 by 257 centimeters, the work marks the artist's first ambitious engagement with his native Ornans as subject matter, initiating a series of grand canvases that would culminate in The Stone Breakers, 1849, and A Burial at Ornans, 1849-1850. Far from being a simple genre scene, After Dinner at Ornans established Courbet's realism as both an aesthetic and ideological program. The assertion that the life of ordinary people deserved representation on the same scale and with the same seriousness as historical or mythological narratives. The painting depicts a group of men gathered in a modest interior, absorbed in the leisurely ritual of music and conviviality after a shared meal. One plays a violin while others listen intently, smoking and drinking. Courbet's treatment of the scene emphasizes the naturalism of posture, gesture, and atmosphere. The figures, rendered life-size, are neither idealized nor caricatured, but presented with the sobriety of lived experience. The palpable density of the space, the muted light, the rustic furnishings, the physical presence of the sitters creates a mood of intimate authenticity. Art historians have long remarked upon Courbet's debt to earlier French masters of genre painting, most notably the Ornans brothers and Jean-Baptiste Simeon Chardin. From Ornans, Courbet inherited the solemn gravity with which everyday gatherings could be depicted. From Chardin, the sensitivity to the quiet poetry of domestic life. Yet Courbet transformed these precedents by radically enlarging the scale, transferring what had traditionally been considered minor subjects onto a vast canvas associated with history painting. In this act, he effectively elevated the status of rural provincial life, asserting its worth as a subject of modern art. The reception of the work at the 1849 Salon confirmed its significance. Awarded a medal and purchased by the French state, After Dinner at Ornans marked Courbet's public breakthrough. Its success stemmed in part from the resonance of its subject matter at a moment of profound social and political upheaval. The revolution of 1848 had freshly underscored questions of class, labor, and national identity. Courbet's dignified portrayal of provincial villagers could thus be read as a democratic gesture, aligning the artist with contemporary calls for recognition of ordinary citizens within the cultural as well as political sphere. The influence of After Dinner at Ornans extended well beyond Courbet's own career. Among those profoundly affected was the young Pierre-Auguste Renoir, who in 1866 painted Mother Anthony's Tavern, a composition that pays explicit homage to Courbet's canvas. Renoir's work demonstrates how Courbet's vision of a convivial provincial gathering could be reinterpreted within the emerging framework of Impressionism, where the depiction of everyday leisure remained central. Seen today, After Dinner at Ornans embodies the essence of Courbet's realism, an insistence on truth to nature, a refusal to privilege the heroic over the quotidian, and a conviction that art must speak to the realities of contemporary life. By monumentalizing the simple act of music-making after a village meal, Courbet inaugurated a new pictorial order in which the ordinary became the ground of artistic modernity. The Stone Breakers, Les Casseurs de Pierre, painted in 1849 by Gustave Courbet, is one of the most iconic, yet tragically lost masterpieces of 19th-century realism. Executed in oil on canvas, the work depicted two laborers breaking stones along a roadside, an old man and a boy, emphasizing the harshness and monotony of physical toil. By choosing such an unidealized subject, Courbet openly rejected the conventions of academic painting and affirmed his dedication to portraying the real conditions of ordinary people. The painting was first exhibited at the Paris Salon of 1850-1851, where it shocked many viewers. At the time, high art was expected to depict grand historical, mythological, or religious themes. Instead, Courbet presented a monumental canvas devoted to anonymous peasants engaged in back-breaking manual labor. The figures are shown without heroism, their faces obscured, emphasizing their universality and the dehumanizing cycle of poverty. The younger worker symbolizes the beginning of a lifetime of hardship, while the elder, stooped with age, represents the inevitable outcome of such labor. Courbet's technique also contributed to the controversy. He employed a heavy impasto, applying thick layers of paint that gave the work a tactile, almost sculptural quality. Critics at the Salon dismissed the piece as crude and poorly lit, but others, such as the philosopher and social theorist Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, recognized its radical message. Proudhon praised the painting as a masterpiece in its genre, interpreting it as a powerful socialist statement about class, labor, and the dignity of the working poor. Over time, the Stonebreakers came to be celebrated as one of Courbet's defining works and a cornerstone of the realist movement. By 1915, it was already considered an important work of modern painting, representing a decisive break from Romanticism and paving the way for later artists who sought truth over idealization. Courbet painted at least two versions of the Stonebreakers. The first, exhibited at the Paris Salon, was acquired by the Gemäldegalerie Alte Meister in Dresden, where it was hailed as Courbet's monumental masterpiece. During World War II, the work was believed to have been destroyed in 1945 during the Allied bombing of Dresden, reportedly when a cart carrying it for evacuation caught fire. Yet archival records remain ambiguous. In 1988, Richard Raskin suggested that the museum listed the painting as missing rather than destroyed, implying it may have been transferred elsewhere in 1944. The second version, a reversed composition of the scene, survived and is preserved today in the Oskar Reinhardt collection in Winterthur, Switzerland. Though lost, the Stonebreakers continues to be a touchstone for art historians. It epitomizes Courbet's ambition to paint what he saw and his determination to elevate humble, everyday realities to the scale of history painting. By monumentalizing the anonymous poor, Courbet both confronted his contemporaries with uncomfortable truths and redefined the very purpose of modern art. Peasants from Flagey back from the fair, Les Peasants de Flagey, Revenant de la Foire, is a monumental oil painting completed by Gustave Courbet in 1850, during the formative years of his realist career. Measuring over 6 meters in width, the canvas is housed today in the Musée Courbet in Ornans. The subject is deceptively simple. A group of villagers from Flagey, a hamlet near Ornans, returning home after attending a fair. They are shown in various states of fatigue, some leading cattle and donkeys, others carrying their purchases, while children and women mingle naturally among them. What distinguishes this work is not merely its subject, but its unprecedented scale. By rendering the procession of ordinary peasants on a canvas of dimensions traditionally reserved for biblical or royal scenes, Courbet radically redefined what could be considered worthy of monumental art. His villages, painted with an earthy palette of browns, greens, and ochres, emerge with tangible weight and specificity. Each figure is individualized with weathered faces, coarse garments, and weary gestures. Yet together they form a collective presence, embodying both the burdens and the dignity of rural life. The surrounding landscape, treated with Courbet's characteristic dense brushwork, is inseparable from the people who inhabit it, reinforcing the profound connection between community and land. The choice of subject matter carried a clear social resonance. Mid-19th century France was a nation divided between the rapid modernization of its cities and the persistence of traditional rural life. By giving peasants the grandeur of historical painting, Courbet asserted their cultural and political importance at a time when rural voices were often excluded from the dominant narratives of French society. His work emerged in the aftermath of the Revolution of 1848, when questions of democracy and class representation were pressing. Although the painting does not depict political struggle, its sheer existence as a monumental celebration of rural people amounted to a visual declaration of their place within the national story. Beyond its social implications, the painting also illustrates Courbet's philosophical stance on art. For him, truth resided in direct observation, not in idealized mythologies. By showing the villagers in their plain reality, without embellishment or theatricality, Courbet aligned himself with contemporary positivist thought, which emphasized empirical evidence and material reality. In doing so, he challenged the hierarchy of subjects in art, implicitly asking why kings and saints should be privileged over common people whose lives are equally part of history. The work thus becomes a democratic statement, an affirmation that the grandeur of art can and should be found in the dignity of the everyday. When it was exhibited at the Salon of 1850-1851, Peasants from Flagey, back from the fair, caused a stir. Many critics, accustomed to polished academic painting, were unsettled by its unvarnished realism and the monumental presence of figures they considered too humble for high art. Others recognized in it a powerful innovation, one that gave voice to social realities long ignored on the walls of official exhibitions. Alongside the Stonebreakers and A Burial at Ornans, this painting confirmed Courbet's position as the leading figure of realism and as an artist intent on reshaping the boundaries of representation. Today, the canvas is seen not simply as a genre scene but as a visual manifesto. It compels viewers to acknowledge the silent endurance of rural life, elevating what might otherwise be overlooked into a central subject of art. In the steady procession of villagers, Courbet invites us to see the unheroic, the ordinary, and the local as part of the broader fabric of human history, challenging us to rethink what deserves a monumental place on canvas. A burial at Ornans, un enterrement à Ornans, painted between 1849 and 1850, stands as one of Gustave Courbet's most ambitious and provocative works. Spanning over 6.5 meters in width, the canvas presents a starkly realistic depiction of a provincial funeral in Courbet's native town of Ornans. The painting's size, typically reserved for grand history paintings, directly confronts the academic tradition by applying monumental scale to an ostensibly ordinary subject. Instead of kings, saints, or mythological heroes, the canvas is populated by anonymous villagers, rendered with unflinching attention to their individuality and physicality. The composition is striking in its sobriety. The figures are arranged horizontally across the canvas, filling the pictorial space without hierarchical distinction. Clergy, mourners, veterans, pallbearers, and dogs alike occupy the same visual field. Each character is portrayed with psychological detachment. Their gestures and expressions range from solemn indifference to distraction, suggesting the banality of ritual rather than the drama of transcendence. Courbet refuses to orchestrate emotion or embellish the scene with allegory. The open grave at the center of the foreground becomes a dark void, anchoring the composition with a raw sense of mortality. Yet it is surrounded by figures who seem more preoccupied with their social roles than with metaphysical reflection. This refusal of idealization embodies Courbet's realist credo, to paint only what he could see. The painting undermines the conventions of religious and historical art by denying narrative climax or spiritual consolation. The funeral becomes not a sacred passage but a communal event, grounded in the physical presence of ordinary people. The surrounding landscape of Ornans' bleak hills beneath a somber sky intensifies the sense of imminence, rooting the event in a specific local reality rather than elevating it to timeless myth. The social and philosophical implications of the work were profound. Exhibited at the Salon of 1850-1851, A Burial at Ornans scandalized critics and viewers alike. Many were disturbed by the audacity of giving provincial peasants the scale of national history, interpreting it as an affront to artistic tradition and bourgeois sensibilities. For Courbet, however, this was precisely the point. The ordinary lives of rural citizens deserved recognition equal to that of historical elites. In this way, the painting functioned as a democratic gesture, aligning with the egalitarian spirit that lingered after the Revolution of 1848. At a deeper level, the painting can also be read as a philosophical meditation on death and human existence. By stripping the funeral of transcendental narrative, Courbet confronts the viewer with the stark materiality of life's end. The grave is simply a hole in the ground. The mourners are distracted, weary, or detached. The clergy appear as functionaries rather than mediators of salvation. In this sense, the painting resonates with a modern, almost existential sensibility, portraying death not as a sacred passage but as an inevitable, mundane fact of life. Critics like Pierre-Joseph Proudhon recognized in the work a radical social message, interpreting it as a visual articulation of democracy and realism in art. Others, however, condemned it as vulgar and nihilistic. Regardless of its reception, A Burial at Ornans marked a turning point in the history of painting. It dismantled the hierarchy of subjects and redefined the possibilities of monumental art. Today, the painting is regarded as a cornerstone of realism, both for its audacious subject matter and for its uncompromising fidelity to material truth. By monumentalizing a simple funeral in a provincial town, Courbet expanded the boundaries of art, compelling viewers to see dignity, meaning, and historical weight in the lives of ordinary people. The painting thus embodies Courbet's belief that realism is not merely an artistic style, but a philosophical stance, one that insists on the centrality of lived experience in the representation of human existence.